Hey everybody, welcome back to TTWM, Tinker Tractor Welder Mechanic, where we don't know what we're doing, but we try the best we can. Today, we might actually get to be able to use our MS500i that we've had for about 2 or 3 months. So let's go ahead, before we use it, go ahead and make a couple modifications that we've got to make it last longer and to be more user-friendly. Stick around and check those out. We bought the MS500i a few months ago, maybe at this point 3 months ago, but we haven't been able to use it at all because we've been busy with a move from Florida to Tennessee. But now the weather's kind of cooled down a little bit. We've got everything over with our move. So now we're able to actually get started having some fun with this guy. The things that we're going to use to increase the performance of this saw are going to be a little bit of the oversized bumper spike kits with a roller chain catcher. That's really going to just help with if we ever lose a chain, things like that, and also of course to bite into a log when we're bucking it, things of that nature. This saw, for as good as it is, for as big as it is, for as professional and high dollar as it is, it just comes with puny tiny little stamped steel bumper spikes, so that's definitely an upgrade. The biggest thing that I like to do is I like to put one of these tank and handle guards on every saw that I have. It goes here on the bottom just to protect the bottom of the saw, keeps it from getting damaged, keeps the tank here protected, just keeps from roughing up the magnesium housings. The reason why I do that is because I actually had a chainsaw one time that I let a friend borrow. He got it stuck in a tree. He used another saw to cut it out. He didn't pay attention, and I didn't even notice until we got done, and maybe a few days later, he actually cut into the tank here. So, of course, not on this saw, but on another saw. So once that happened and I found out about these guys, I've bought a protection plate for every saw that I have, that they have available for. It's cheap insurance. It's available on eBay from a place called Custom Chainsaw Parts. One of the main things that I like about the current Stihl professional grade saws, and I mentioned it in another video, which I'm going to link right here in the top, is going to be these captured nuts that all of the clutch covers have for the current professional grade saws. I think that these captured nuts here are just a great feature on all saws. So if you're on the fence about, oh, should I spend the money on a professional grade saw or should I get like a farm and ranch saw as an example, to me, these captured nuts themselves, just the convenience, it's worth it just for that. You can see these skid plates are awesome, not just because they protect your tank, but they also come with any accessories or any hardware that you may need taped to the skid plate. This one includes 2 longer bolts and 2 spacers, because we're actually going to replace the factory hardware. Here at the front handlebar mount, we've got these 2 bolts. They're T27, so I'm just taking my handy dandy Stihl chainsaw tool with the Torx bits and removing those bolts. There are the 2 removed bolts. You can see the difference in length between the 2. This is the factory Stihl bolt on the right hand side. This is the replacement bolt, or screws I should say. And then of course, because of that length difference, is going to be the necessitate that spacer. So the spacer is going to go on the inside of the tank guard to the handlebar bolts. The one thing that I don't like about the hardware that they provide in the kit is, you can see, of course, the factory Stihl hardware or the T27 Torx, but the supplied hardware is going to be just a Phillips head. I'm pretty particular about things, and I think if anybody has seen me on Hamiltonville Farm, Hank always makes fun of me because I clean stuff all the time, way more than what it needs to be. So there's a little bit of goop on this, so I'm going to spray some adhesive remover on the skid plate and just get rid of that. I know that it doesn't matter in the end. Nobody's going to see it. Even if it collects some dust and sawed chips and stuff, it's between the body of the saw. However, I just want it gone. So let's go ahead and make sure that that's nice and clean. Still got a little bit of residual left over. Just wipe it off good. And same thing, make sure that the body of the saw is as clean as possible. And this isn't just for this saw installation, it's for anything. If you're bolting anything on or putting anything on anything, as an example, a bolt-on cutting edge on a loader bucket, you want to make sure when you put those things together that everything's just as clean as possible, so that you don't have fitment issues, so that stuff doesn't get loose, doesn't work loose in the future, things like that. So it's just always a good step to take to make sure that installations just go well. First thing we're going to do for our installation, take the little spacers, place them in the holes that the original factory bolts came out, where that they're standing off. The installation is obviously going to be different for different saws. I've got these plates on my Echo CS620, my MS261s. I've put it on my Echo CS590 before. They're all a little bit different, but they're all pretty much the same. Just fit it on however you can fit it on. Now you're going to take the plate. You see there's nothing that secures the plate mechanically, as far as bolts or anything, to the handle, to the tank assembly, except for these tabs and these slide tabs. You can see here that they're bent over 90 degrees, or actually on 3 sides if you count the plate. So all you do is slide it on the handle, make sure that it's over the spacers on the top, and then you're ready to screw it down. You can see here the fitment, or how the spacers sit inside the handle and inside the tank guard. Just take your 2 supplied screws, and by the way, these are stainless, so we don't have to worry about them rusting. Install in the holes and just tighten them down. Now you can see that these are not standard, bolts. They're screws that are designed to go into the plastic. So when you're tightening these down, make sure you don't tighten them down like crazy. Just get them snugged up and they should be good to go. Now that is the tank guard installed. Next up are going to be our little bit larger spikes and our roller chain catcher. Again, this is a super easy installation. All of these part numbers from Stihl, I'll go ahead and put in the description section as well, so that you can have them to refer back to. The top portion of the bumper spike is held on the inside with a nut. The bottom bolt for the bumper spike is actually just threaded through the tank case, or the crankcase half here. The bolts are going to be a T27. This inner nut is going to be an 8mm or a 5/16. And you're going to want to keep this hardware to reuse with the new spike. And you can see on this bottom portion, this bottom bolt actually holds on the factory chain catcher as well. So this is the factory just bent aluminum chain catcher. And I'm sure it does its job, but again, for such a nice saw, for such an expensive saw, to me, this is just not, this isn't the way to go, especially, you know, with the spikes and stuff. I'm not saying that I'm smarter than Stihl engineers. I just don't know why that they elected for the cost savings for this when this saw is a $1,500 saw. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can really see the size difference here between the factory inner spike and this is a factory inner spike too. This spike is a 661 spike. This is the factory 661 spike, as well as I believe the like West Coast version of the 461 462s, like the MS 461R, MS 462R. So these aren't any kind of ridiculous aftermarket huge spikes. These are spikes that Stihl makes. The installation is just the reverse of removal. I like to go ahead and start with the top bolt first, just to hang it. And then we'll take the bottom bolt. I did forget my Loctite at the house. I normally like to use Loctite anytime that I take a bolt out, but this is just going to have to be something that I'll go back and do later on. Just remember, when you do this, you might be in your shop or at the house or in your garage or whatever. Just remember to go ahead and grab the Loctite first, so you won't have to rework it. And especially because this inner nut is a metal crimped style lock nut. So anytime that I disturb those, I definitely like to go ahead and Loctite the bolt once I reuse them. Get this guy tightened up again. An 8mm, or this wrench is a 5/16, but 8mm and 5/16, they're literally the exact same size within maybe a few thousandths of an inch. So I have no qualms about using those interchanged metric and standard sizes. Now for the roller chain catcher, this is going to be the roller, this is going to be the bolt. Of course, this is the nut that you use to secure it. This little round piece is going to be a spacer if it's required to fit inside the hole here on the bumper spike. Looks like that this one might be. It goes on the thread portion down here. And then this is the retainer. It's just a friction retainer that gets slid once the roller spike goes down onto the stud. Then the retainer just gets forced down on there. And to do that, I like to just use a small 1/4" drive socket of whatever size works. It's usually, I think, 5/16 8mm. Fits right over it and pushes it down perfectly. Same thing as before. I like to use Loctite. I just forgot. Just make sure that you use it when you go to assemble it. I checked the size of the hole, and we will not need this spacer, the spacer that comes with the kit. So you can go ahead, just lay that to the side. You'll just insert the stud through the bottom hole of the spike, and then you'll use your lock nut on the bottom of the stud. And then the stud does have some flat shoulders that you can use to grab it with. Use the wrench to grab to hold the stud steady, and then just run it up tight. Now we're ready for our actual roller. Doesn't matter which side you put it on, just slide it over the stud. Now we're ready for our small retaining ring here. We can go ahead and put it over the top. I'm using this flathead screwdriver to kind of space it out a little bit, to spread it out a little bit. and then try to drive it on with the socket. I'm having to move up to a bigger socket because that one's not as deep as I need it to be. I had to move up to the next size socket because just it wasn't broached as deeply as I needed it to be on the other one. There we go. So you can see that's what it should look like. There's not really any movement up and down there, but it can still roll. Hence the term roller chain catcher. Now all that's left is to remove the old outer spike and put on the new outer spike. Again, these are going to be 8mm bolts. Well, it looks as though that there's a bit of an interference up here on the top corner, so I will have to adjust that out with a file. You can see about 15 or 20 strokes of my flat chainsaw file took care of the problem. This corner here had a radius on the spike, so I just squared it up. I came down and basically filed the entire length of the spike just to give some room for it to sit against. I probably could have taken a couple more strokes right here because it's touching just a little bit, but I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I think that this will work just fine. So that is something to keep in mind if you want to do this upgrade and modification. Again, I did not use any Loctite on these nuts or on the bolts to hold the nuts in. I highly recommend it, and as soon as I get back to where I have some Loctite handy, I'm going to go ahead and disassemble everything and Loctite it back up. But for right now, for our operation, I don't think that this is going to hurt anything. Just reinstall those lock nuts and then tighten it down with your 8mm wrench, ratchet, or socket. And then this installation will be complete. Now that we've got everything lined up and installed, let's go ahead and see how it works. You can see the fitment here for the roller chain catcher. The stud goes into the corresponding hole on the bottom of the outer bumper spike. And then whenever the clutch cover is secured, it acts as just a good, strong, heavy-duty bridge, as opposed to the factory aluminum catcher. So this, I've seen several saws, I've bought several used saws, where this aluminum factory chain catcher is either bent, mangled, completely cut off, whatever. So you would have to totally replace this. On this roller style chain catcher, you can, if it does get damaged, you can replace just the roller portion. So to me, this is a much better upgrade than this aluminum chain catcher. And honestly, the only reason why I really wanted to go with these larger spikes, I know a lot of people go with the larger spikes just because it looks cool or whatever. I'm more function over form. I don't really care about the size of the spikes. I'm here on the East Coast, Tennessee. We don't have a lot of really thick bark like they do out on the West Coast. What I really wanted was I wanted the roller chain catcher, because I've had chains fly off on me before. I want something that's a little heavier duty, a little bit more protective, not just for myself, but also for the saw. This chain catcher, when combined with the protective skid plate here, will greatly increase the life of the saw, keep it from getting beat up, all that stuff. So this feature here plus this feature here, to me, are the first things that you really need to do to a saw before you even go to gas it up and use it, if you want to keep it looking good, functioning good for the long term. For me, buying a professional saw, that's the goal. But whenever I buy something, I want to make sure that it lasts, that it does good, that it does as good a job as possible, and I don't want to have to go back and buy something every year, every 2 years, every 5 years. I want this saw to last me 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I want this saw to be something that will get the job done no matter what, and still at least reasonably look okay while that's happening. You can see here, after the video, I was putting the saw back together, and I decided, well, let me go ahead and make sure that my oiler's turned all the way up. This plate is actually blocking the access to the oiler adjustment knob. So I've marked it here. I hope you can kind of see it. You can see the oiler adjustment plate knob right there, or not the knob, but the hole to get to it. I'm actually going to have to go ahead and take this back off and cut a section out of it to make sure that I can get to the adjustment. That's actually not a huge deal for me. I go ahead and turn my oiler up all the way regardless and leave it there. But that is something to keep in mind if you use this plate, if they've not changed it, and if you do like to have adjustment of your oiler. Just something to be aware of before you go ahead and install it. Honestly, I might just leave it because, like I say, I've got it turned up. I know it's turned up. I'll take it off just to double check that, but I don't really lower my oil flow, so I'll probably just leave it. But again, that's something that you should be aware of if you like to adjust your oiler for conditions. All right, so now I've shown you what the first thing that I do to a saw is to get it ready to cut, to get to the level that I want it to be ran at. What about you? Tell me some of the things that you like to do. Leave a comment down below. I know a lot of people, they won't touch a saw, they won't use a saw unless it's been ported, unless they've put a bigger bar on it, unless they've, you know, got a specific chain or whatever. What are the things that you look for to really make sure that a saw is really ready to work the way that you want it to work? Go ahead and leave a comment below. Again, this is Tinker Tractor Welder Mechanic, TTWM. If you like this kind of content, chainsaws, outdoor power equipment, tractors, excavators, just trying to figure out how to do things, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I've got another video here that I'm going to put a link to that I'm sure that you'll enjoy. Have a great day.